The Jets head to San Francisco week 1 for a game against the NFC Champion 49ers. There are some wild card players in this game who could step up and lead the Jets to victory, and we'll talk about who they are today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Tuesday, September 3rd, 2024, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com. Thanking you so much for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. Subscribe to the show for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts so you'll get new episodes as soon as they're posted. If you enjoy the show and are listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. It helps us out. It helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Well, I hope you had a good Labor Day. We are now past Labor Day. It is the unofficial ending of the summer, which means football's right around the corner. Real football. The Jets kick off the 2024 NFL season, the NFL regular season, in less than 1 week. Monday night of next week, they play against the San Francisco 49ers. A marquee matchup, once again, week 1 of the NFL season. Just as last year, the Jets had a Monday night marquee matchup week 1 against the Buffalo Bills. Of course, we hope things go a little differently this year. Now, the Jets beat the Bills last year in week 1, so we hope that continues. But as you may remember, the Jets lost their quarterback 4 plays into that game, and that quarterback did not return for the rest of the season. The Jets trying to get their season off on a positive note. And today we're going to talk about 3 players who I think are wild cards in this game who could help potentially swing the game to the Jets. And I'm going to start with the guy who has been a big topic of conversation through training camp, through the preseason, because he hasn't been there, and that's Haason Reddick. And it feels to me like the next 1 to 3 days are going to be pretty important for this whole Haason Reddick saga, because yes, we know he's been compiling fines, $50,000 a day, missing training camp. The final total is over $2 million Haason Reddick has been fined for skipping training camp as he seeks a new contract. And I think if we're being honest, I'm not saying this is the only reason he held out, but if we're being honest, lots of veteran players like skipping training camp. I think that there is an element of Haason Reddick just not wanting to go to training camp. Obviously, the biggest motivation, though, is he wants a new contract. And now the question is, will he push this into the regular season? And as I said, today, tomorrow, Thursday, those are 3 days I'm watching, because those would be 3 very logical days if he's not going to push it into the regular season for him to report. And that goes back to the way teams prepare for the season. Now, in a typical week in the NFL for a lot of teams, you play on Sunday. Monday's the day players go into the facility. They get some treatment, bumps and bruises from the Sunday game. They watch some film. Tuesday is typically the day off. So Tuesday is the day where it's the day off for the players. The reason it's the day off for the players is that's the day the coaches get together and come up with the game plan for that week. So the coaches go through their playbook, which could have over 1,000 plays, and they pick out the handful of plays that they think are best suited to beat that week's opponent. So these are our first down plays. These are a handful of first down plays we're going to run. These are a handful of second and long, second and medium, second and short, third down. Our red zone plays, our goal line plays, our 2-point conversion plays. You come up with those. You come up with the plays that you're actually going to run from your playbook on Tuesday. Wednesday, Thursday, those are the days you practice those plays. And then Friday to a lesser extent. So this week may be a little different from the Jets. And I don't know if the Jets have the exact same schedule as a lot of these other teams that I've heard about. But if you think about it, they're playing Monday, so that could push things back a day. It could be like, it could be Thursday, Friday are the days you implement the game plan instead of Wednesday, Thursday, since it's the Monday night game. The fact week 1 comes into play. So it's a little less exact than it would be normally. But I think today, tomorrow, Thursday, those are the 3 logical days for Reddick to report. And this will tell us a lot about how far Reddick wants to push this thing, how far he wants to escalate this thing. Because to this point, look, $50,000 a day, $2 million, I mean, it's a lot of money. But now Reddick's going to start missing game checks because, and there's a lot of discussion, whenever a player holds out, honor your contract. And there are lots of different elements to that we could get into. But if you're saying honor your contract, one thing I should point out is that if Reddick doesn't play, he doesn't get his salary. So it's not like Reddick's benefiting from his contract by sitting out. Reddick's contract is very contingent on him playing. And he's going to start missing game checks because the way players are paid their base salary is they essentially, after every game, they get sent a check. And their base salary is divided by 17. And they get 1/17 of their salary after every game. So Reddick is now going to start missing around $900,000 per week. So, $2 million for missing training camp. That's one thing. Start missing almost $1 million a week. That's pretty big. So the question is, how far does Reddick want to push this? And I'm hoping he'll report because the Jets don't sound like they're really in the mindset that they want to negotiate with Reddick. Joe Douglas did a press conference last week. And I mean, Douglas said some things that were tough to believe. Like he said, I wouldn't do anything differently, which, I mean, I don't really know what to say to that. When he was talking about trading for Reddick. But it sounds like, either Reddick's going to report or Jets are just going to let him sit out and miss his game checks. So the logical thing has always been for Reddick to report, but the logical thing was also for Reddick to go to training camp and not, get fined $2 million. So I guess we'll see what happens. But if Reddick plays in this game, he certainly can make a difference. Now, I think the Jets can survive without Reddick. Last year, you may remember the Jets missed Sauce Gardner for a couple of games. There was actually one game the Jets played where they did not have Sauce Gardner or DJ Reed that they won. And it was because the pass rush really heated up that week. And that's one of the nice things about having both a great pass rush and great corners is that if you're missing one, you can lean on the other. And Jets pass rush is not going to be bad without Reddick. You'll still have Quinnen Williams. You'll still have Jermaine Johnson. But you can lean on your corners more. It's not a great pass rush without Reddick. With Reddick, it can be a great pass rush. But a good pass rush plus great corners still is a defense where you can produce. But when you have both, it just takes your defense to the next level. Now, if Reddick plays, I'm not expecting him to get a full snap count this week. He's got to work himself into game shape. I'm sure Reddick's in great condition, right? I'm sure he's in great physical condition, but, he hasn't been practicing. And there's a difference between being in football shape and just being in good condition. I think the benefit for Reddick is that, he's not playing a position like safety where you need to know like a lot about the playbook. If you play like linebacker or safety, you have different assignments on every play. It can get kind of complex, and the missed practice time can really hurt you in that area. For Reddick, his job is just to get up the field and get to the quarterback. So not going to be as much of a challenge from that standpoint. So I think the Jets will be able to play him. I don't think I think they'll probably have him on a pitch count if he plays. But listen, a pass rusher of Haason Reddick's caliber can always change the game, and especially if the Jets get a lead in the second half. And the 49ers are put in a position where they have to throw the ball. I mean, that's the situation where Reddick can be particularly dangerous for an offense. So I'm not really sure how this is going to go. I mean, I've been kind of leaning towards logic will win out in the end. And that has not really played out because for Reddick, it feels like this contract is really important to him. It feels like it's really important to him to the point where he's willing to take the fines. He's been willing to take $2 million worth of fines. The question is, will he take this to the next level? Because if he skips week one, then this thing has gone to the next level. And this, it's not really clear where the end game is. So the next 3 days, today is Tuesday, it's after the holiday. Tomorrow would be the traditional day teams would start putting in the game plan. Thursday might be the day they start putting in the game plans. It's a Monday night game. Difficult. So I'm just going to say over the next day, 2-3 days, this is going to be important because if Reddick doesn't report then I don't really know when he's going to report. Then it's anybody's guess when he's going to report. The first date to watch was training camp. When he skipped the start of training camp, there was a pretty good chance he was going to take this to now. The question is, how much further will he take it? And if he plays, it certainly could be a boost for the Jets. Now, one guy we know will play is a big wide receiver the Jets signed, a critical player on that side of the ball. Robert Saleh says he's going to play, but it's not clear how much they're going to get from him. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about what Mike Williams might produce and how it could impact the Jets week one against San Francisco. That's ahead of here on this Tuesday episode. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. You've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Well, now we have something a little different for you. Now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a 3-week free trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Then with a YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday out of market game. All you need is a Google account and a current form of payment, and you can cancel anytime. And look, if you live out of market, NFL Sunday Ticket's a must. Now, Jets play national TV week 1. They also play national TV week 3. They have a couple other primetime games through the season, but not all of them are primetime. Week 2 against Tennessee, that's an afternoon game. You don't live in New York, you may not get it. Do you really want to have to depend on CBS and Fox all Europe to watch the Jets? I don't think you do. And NFL Sunday Ticket's the place to get it. And you can get, again, a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket through YouTube and YouTube TV by betting $5 on FanDuel. So you can bet on the Jets, you can win some money, and you can watch the Jets. I mean, how do you get a better deal than that? Just visit FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Again, it's FanDuel.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. Big shout out to you, everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets. We have new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. For your second listen, you should know the new Locked On NFL is here. Locked On NFL is now 2 shows every day. First, the madman Tyler Rowland kicks off your morning with a double shot of NFL espresso, and then stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. Add in the Locked On local experts, and you get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, and all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. Make the madman Tyler Rowland and the barber Tony Wiggins your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And today we are focused on Monday Night Football, Week 1. Just 6 days away, the Jets kick off their 2024 season in San Francisco. A marquee matchup Monday night, Week 1, just like a year ago where the Jets played the Buffalo Bills. And that was that game against Buffalo Week 1 last year, that opener, I don't think I've ever left a game with more mixed emotions because the Jets won this thrilling game. They had this incredible comeback in the second half, won it in overtime on a punt return, and lost their quarterback for the season. Hopefully we just get a win and we keep our quarterback this year. And one of the elements the Jets will need to lean on to get a win is their passing game. And the Jets have a new number 2 receiver this year, Mike Williams. We talked a bit about him yesterday, how important of a player he is for this offense. In fact, when you're talking about the offseason moves the Jets made, I think there are really 4 big moves. I think this offseason really comes down to 4 moves the Jets made. 2 of them were on the offensive line. One was Tyron Smith. One was Morgan Moses. You need both of these guys to hold up at the tackle position. One was Reddick. The Jets let some talented defensive ends leave because they thought Reddick would be an upgrade. Hopefully he reports. The 4th guy, though, is Mike Williams. And Mike, all of these 4 address different areas. Obviously Smith and Moses addressed the offensive line, which was a huge problem last year. Reddick is trying to take a good spot, the pass rush, and take it to the next level because Reddick has been an elite pass rusher over the last couple of years. Williams is about fixing the skill group because last year the skill group had 2 reliable guys. They had Breece Hall and they had Garrett Wilson. And I think in an ideal world, you need 3. And Williams is supposed to be the 3rd guy. Now, there are questions surrounding Williams as he recovers from a very serious knee injury. The Jets were very optimistic about him playing Week 1 as we began training camp. He was not part of the main drills, and he finally just returned to the main drills a few weeks ago. Robert Saleh indicated late last week that Williams is going to play Week 1, but Saleh also tried to downplay expectations for Williams. Now, there's a caveat here, is that Saleh injury updates are notoriously unreliable. So, this could mean the fact Saleh is saying he'll play, but we need to keep expectations in check. I mean, this could mean that Williams is going to go out and play great. It could also mean that Williams doesn't. He's going to play, but Saleh is notoriously a very unreliable narrator when it comes to players recovering from injuries. But I think Williams is a critical player for the Jets on offense this year. I think the Jets have a ton riding on Mike Williams because if you take Mike Williams out of the equation, well, your skill group is pretty much what your skill group was last year, especially at the wide receiver position. We're right back to leaning on Allen Lazard, and we're back to leaning on Xavier Gibson. And I don't know how much Malachi Corley is really going to give you. If you have Williams there, and Williams is producing, I said this yesterday. I'll say it again because I think it's really important to understand. Everybody just slides into a place that's where they belong. Garrett Wilson's going to be your go-to guy. Williams is your number 2 guy, allows players like Lazard and Gibson to slide into more supporting roles. And quite frankly, I think for most teams, if you compare the number 3, number 4 receivers in the league, you're probably not going to find that great of a difference. I mean, there are a couple teams that are really, really deep at receiver, but outside of that, I mean, most teams don't really have number 3 or 4, number 4 receivers who are materially different from Lazard. If we get to the Green Bay Lazard or Gibson, they're just kind of guys who will catch the ball if it's thrown to them. Now, not Jets Lazard last year, but guys who really aren't going to add anything special to the equation. They just happen to be there. They're like, if you have to check it down or if you have to get to your third read, they're there. And Williams, I think, also plays a big role because he brings a lot to the table that he brings pretty much everything Garrett Wilson doesn't bring to the table stylistically. And I'm not a big believer that, you necessarily need complementary receivers. I don't think you necessarily need receivers with complementary skill sets because I think it's more about being a good receiver. Miami, I don't know the Miami receivers are really complementary. They just have one skill that overwhelms everything else. They, Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle both have speed. But Williams, he has a bigger, more physical element. And I think that based on what Salah said, we might see Mike Williams on a pitch count, which, is a logical move. Mike Williams being available in November, December is much more important than Mike Williams being, playing the full game in September. And if he is in a pitch count, he'll get some key snaps. When the Jets are in rough downs and distances on third down, Mike Williams will go there. In the red zone, he'll be there. He's a bigger target. In the red zone, there's just not a lot of space to work with. So you bigger guys, you want guys you can just throw the ball up to because nobody's really going to be able to create a ton of separation on the goal line because the space is so condensed. There is no space. So how do you create separation? There's no space to separate the goal line. And you know what I mean. I mean, players can get separation on the goal line, but it's more difficult. So a player like Williams can be important there. We don't know how much Williams is going to play. We don't know how much he's going to produce. I mean, it's entirely possible that Williams is not 100% back yet, and the Jets might just be using him as a decoy, which is not an awful thing because he's at least a guy you have to account for, especially in the situations I mentioned, just because of his size. He's a tough matchup for a lot of opposing corners. And he's a guy who can at least take some of the attention off Garrett Wilson. I mean, I think one of the problems the Jets had last year on the offensive side of the ball is that if Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall did not have big games, the offense could not function. And, like people would criticize Garrett Wilson if he had a bad game, or people would criticize Breece Hall if he had a bad game. But the problem was like the Jets offense could not sustain their best players having a bad game, which is not true of good offenses. Good offenses, you have somebody else who pick up the slack. So this year, Williams is the guy who hopefully can pick up the slack when Garrett Wilson maybe has an off game. At week one, how much is he going to play? If Salah's prognostication is maybe underselling how close Williams is to being 100%, perhaps Williams could go out there and have a big game. And I think that certainly would help the Jets. And look, I think red zone is going to be critical for Williams. I think the Jets brought Williams in for many reasons, but I think one of the biggest reasons is they wanted a big target for Rodgers to throw to in the red zone, a guy he can just throw the ball up to, and trust that he's going to come down with it. So look, I think if the Jets win this game, I would not be surprised to look back and see Mike Williams have a touchdown catch in the red zone. Maybe posting somebody up, maybe high pointing a ball in there and delivering a big catch for the Jets. Now, here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll talk about our third wild card, and the reason he's a wild card isn't due to a holdout or injury. It's just because he's never played in a real NFL game before, but he's a guy who was turning heads all training camp, and he's a guy who could give the Jets a very talented backfield. We'll talk about who that is as we continue here on this Tuesday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by Game Time. U.S. Open time in New York. About a year ago, I went to the U.S. Open, and I used Game Time to buy a ticket. It was about an hour before the U.S. Open started that day, and I didn't have a ticket yet. So I decided, I'm going to pull this out. I can't believe the deal I found. Since then, I've used Game Time a couple other times. Every single time it's been right before the event. It's been a very affordable ticket, and you also get the view before you buy. They show you a picture of what it's going to look like in your seat. So there's no surprises. There's no obstructed view you weren't expecting. Game Time is the place to go to find tickets. And you should know that Game Time now filters through the fluff to show you incredible deals on great seats so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time has a new feature. It's called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets for your favorite live events even easier. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL. It's one word with no space, LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. This show is sponsored by BetterHelp. What's something you'd love to learn? As an adult, do you make time to learn new things as often as you like, or was that lost in childhood? Kids are always learning and growing, but as adults, sometimes we lose that curiosity. What's something you'd like to learn? Gardening, a new language, maybe how to finally beat your best friend in bowling? Therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back to school era can come at any age. And therapy has a lot of benefits. It's helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. It empowers you to be the best version of yourself. It's not just for those who've experienced major trauma. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Rediscover your curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. This is the Locked On Jets podcast on this Tuesday. We're just 6 days away from the Jets kicking off the 2024 season in San Francisco. Monday Night Football. Aaron Rodgers' return to the field. Of course, we know Aaron Rodgers is going to have a lot to say about whether the Jets beat the San Francisco 49ers or not. But so are some of the players we're talking about today. There are some wild card players who could help the Jets onto victory if they have a big game. And the third guy I'm going to talk about is a rookie who really impressed everybody in training camp. He impressed people during the offseason practices after he was drafted. He impressed people in training camp. He had a very good performance week 1 against the Washington Commanders in the preseason, and that is Braylon Allen. And we know the running back position is not necessarily that important, but what we saw in that week 1 preseason game against Washington, we saw a guy who was, first of all, decisive. We saw a guy who made good reads. We saw a guy who had bursts. We saw a guy who looked like the freshman at Wisconsin, who seemed like he was on his way to stardom. When Braylon Allen was 17 years old in 2021, 17, so he should have been in high school. He was dominating the Big Ten. He ran for almost 7 yards per carry, and he also ran for almost 7 yards per carry against 8-man boxes. So he's a big guy, tough runner, but also showed some bursts. Then the last 2 years wasn't as explosive. And, there are lots of potential reasons for that. But there's something, when you're talking about a 4th-round pick, I always like to see some sign of potential hidden greatness. And the fact that this kid went out and again ran for almost 7 yards per carry as a 17-year-old, a guy who should have been in high school in one of the best conferences in the country, shows me that there's some real talent there. And we know that, we know this because we've seen Breece Hall struggles the last couple of years. We know that much of the running back position's production is based on the caliber of blocking. Now, we think that the Jets are going to have better run blocking this year because the caliber of the offensive line, at least on paper, has gone up quite a bit. But I think that one of the things that separates the guys, the okay backs from the guys who really make a difference are the big runs. And we saw some burst from Braylon Allen in the preseason. Here's the other thing. I think one of the things you have to do is compare where the Jets are this year versus where they were a year ago. And think about the caliber of snaps you're getting from each position. Last year when Breece Hall left the field, the Jets got horrific production at the running back position because Dalvin Cook, I don't want to say Dalvin Cook was cooked. That's a really bad play on words, but Dalvin Cook was just finished. Dalvin Cook was an awful signing. I need to go delete all the podcast episodes where I said it was a good move because it ended up being a dreadful move. The Jets got horrific production. They got horrific snaps last year when Breece Hall was off the field. And this year, they could potentially get production that's much better. And I don't want to put too much on Braylon Allen right now because he is a rookie. We haven't seen him play in a real game yet. But as I say frequently, I look at kind of a player's arc for a season like it's a novel, like it's a long book. We're now to the point where the regular season's about to start. And Braylon Allen's impressed everybody up to this point. Now, when the first couple chapters are the offseason practices and training camp and the preseason, and the players impressed everybody, the next few chapters do not necessarily mean the player is going to continue to impress everybody. It does not necessarily mean the player is going to continue to stand out. But in situations where there are breakouts, frequently the first few chapters are about the player turning heads in offseason, and the player turning heads in training camp, and the player turning heads during the preseason games. It's not necessarily it's not a guarantee, but frequently we have signs of a breakout coming. Frequently we kind of see that wave building. And Braylon Allen again has been very impressive. And I think one of the areas where he surprised people is that he's shown that he potentially could be a target in the receiving game where he was not utilized often in Wisconsin. And at the running back position, you don't have a ton of great route runners. The running back position is all about can you secure the catch? Because once you secure the catch, it's almost like taking a handoff. Now I know the blocking is not the same. They aren't designing a block to go to the hole, to get into a specific hole like you do when you take a handoff. But once you secure the catch, it's all about can you make something happen with the ball in your hands. One of the things Braylon Allen, if you watch his film in Wisconsin, he has good hands. If even off-target throws, he's able to adjust and pluck them in. So Braylon Allen, I think, can be a weapon in the passing game, but he also could be a guy who potentially produces big plays. And as we know, so many games in the NFL come down to a big play or two. And last year, when the Jets handed the ball off, their only chance to get a big play was with Breece Hall, took the handoff. If Dalvin Cook took the handoff, you knew you were not getting a big play. So you really reduced your chances of getting the big game-changing play in the run game because you only had one back who was capable of doing it. This year, potentially, you have two. And again, this is all theoretical. It's all to a degree. It's speculation because we haven't seen Braylon Allen actually do it. But he's a guy who, again, has shown us some ability. And he's a guy because he hasn't played before. He's a wild card. But I think we all have very high hopes for Braylon Allen right now. And the week one will be the first chance to see whether he can meet them. Anyway, that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoy the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and listening on a podcast source, please give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoy the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Tuesday, everybody, and send in your mailbag questions. Tomorrow we will do our weekly mailbag show. Talk to you then.